Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's program. Today's program is a family program which is rated PG. Profanity or inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated in the chat or Q&A. Please keep questions on topic and they will be answered in a timely manner. Failure to follow these guidelines will result in being muted in the chat or Q&A, or possibly being removed from the live stream. So I'm going to take this chance to point out some of the features of Zoom. Currently, the chat box has been disabled for this presentation. Any comments can be emailed to me and I will respond after this presentation. My email will be posted towards the end. For any questions you may have, a Q&A box is located at the bottom of the screen. Questions will be answered in a timely manner throughout the presentation through Scout Kirby, who is my AmeriCorps counterpart, and she will be moderating and answering the chat box today. So today's program is titled Nevada Birding for Beginners. It's essentially an introduction on where to find birds and methods of identification. My name is Amanda Mulholland, and I am an AmeriCorps worker, wildlife educator with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, and I hope you enjoy this presentation today. So we are going to start out with, where can I find birds? Well, it's awesome because birds are everywhere. We really just need to pay attention. Once we start paying attention, we'll notice that they can be found anywhere from parks to parking lots. On the left, we have a Canada goose family at one of the parks in Reno. And on the right, we have a brewer's blackbird. I like to nickname these parking lot birds because anytime I go shopping, I know I will probably see one in the parking lot. So birds are found on all 7 continents, from penguins in the Antarctic tundra to ostrich in the Pacific. And this is great because it means that bird watching can be done anywhere. This can be done in backyards, ponds, parks, open fields, and even parking lots. So the next time you take a walk around your neighborhood, I want you to count how many different birds you see. Or the next time you sit in your backyard, listen for how many different bird calls you hear. Birds are all around us consistently. To see these large congregations of birds, refuges, national parks, and state parks are all great places to go look. We are fortunate to have so many protected spaces like Great Basin National Park or our National Wildlife Refuges, of which we have 9. If you live in Reno or you're local to Reno, Oxbow Nature Study Area was a sheep pasture that has been transformed into a protected wetland, which houses multiple bird species. There are some benefits to bird watching. So these benefits are basically derived from being outside in nature. So being outside in nature has impacts on our physical health. Being outside has a strong correlation with physical activity. Research shows that people who walk 15 to 30 minutes a day tend to have fewer diseases and lower risks of cancer, heart attack, type 2 diabetes, and stroke. Some other benefits are towards our mental health. Ecotherapy is an emerging field which shows strong connections between spending time in nature and reduced stress, anxiety, and depression. There are a few things to keep in mind when birding, and these are really encapsulated through the Code of Birding Ethics. The Code of Birding Ethics was developed by the American Birding Association as a guideline of things we should keep in mind. So the first is to respect and promote birds in their environment. In the field, we can do this through avoiding stressing out birds. We should be aware of nesting colonies, roosts, or feeding sites, and exercise restraint and distancing when around them. This is a photo of American white pelicans nesting, who have a nesting colony on Pyramid Lake's Onaho Island National Wildlife Refuge. We can also do this through minimizing habitat disturbance, staying on trails, and keeping dogs leashed. Dogs might run up on nesting birds, and ground nesting birds are extra vulnerable to this. In spring, birds are getting ready to fledge or leave the nest, and these birds commonly spend a period of time on the ground, leaving them more vulnerable to predation or dogs running up on them. We can also be doing this in respect and promote birds in our own property. We can use native plants in our landscaping. These native plants provide sources of food and shelter, which will ultimately attract more birds to your backyard. We can also try to prevent window strikes. So adding window clings or window chalk to our glass surfaces allow birds to basically see that there is a glass, which reduces the chance of a window strike. We can also be keeping our cats indoors. Cats are the #1 predators of backyard birds. On average, they are estimated to harm about 1.3 to 3.7 billion birds every year. Just by keeping your cats inside, you can help reduce the number of bird predation. Our second ethic is to respect and promote the birding community and its members. This means that we should be sharing our observations freely and educating other birders positively on ethical birdwatching to keep it fun for all of us. Whether you're new or experienced, embrace the willingness to learn that every birder has. Respect one another's skill level and experience, and let birders know what birds you found, tips on how to tell the difference between birds, and other helpful tips and tricks. Now this leads us to our third ethic, which is to respect and promote the law and rights of others. This essentially means that we should never enter private property without landowner permission, and we should also familiarize ourselves on laws, rules, and regulations. One such law we should all keep in mind is the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which makes it illegal to take, possess, import, export, sell, or purchase any migratory bird or its parts. Now, parts includes nests, eggs, feathers, etc., unless a federal permit is obtained. Now, this law was put in place in 1918 to protect birds when they neared extinction due to overhunting during colonial times. So now we will be getting into how to spot a bird. So the first thing that we should do is to stop. We are easily distracted, and when walking around, it can be hard to focus on the subtle movements of birds around you or hear their calls over our breath or the swishing of our clothes. And then we should look. Take a moment to look around and try to notice the fluttering in the bushes or the silhouette of a bird at the top of a tree. Next, we should listen. You might be able to hear a bird before you see it. Focus on that sound and use it to guide your eyes to the bird. Advanced birders can identify birds just from sound alone. And then repeat these steps. Continue walking down your path and repeat these steps every so often. It's been proven that a person will see more birds if they cover more area than if they just let the birds come to them. And now we're going to get into how to identify. So when identifying by field mark, you are essentially using a visible mark or characteristic. This is most birders' go-to method of identification. And just like in other fields of study, birders have their own terminology for certain marks. One example is the eyebrow stripe, a stripe which appears right above the eyebrow. Binoculars can be a great tool to get up-close looks at faraway birds. It can be pricey, but can be a great investment for even average birders. If I were to use field marks to describe this mallard, I would definitely point out that bright green head and the white ring around its neck. I probably would also point out the curling tail feathers. Here is an American robin. And if you look at it, you'll notice that it has this reddish kind of muddy brown color on its chest. In most field guides, this color is called rufous. Rufous is a common color throughout bird species, so I thought I would point it out today because I personally had never heard of the color rufous until I got into birding. We can also identify birds by size and shape. So we can infer the size of mystery birds through comparing them with birds that we can identify. And we can also identify birds to family, as many bird species will be shaped similarly to others in the same family. We can look at the American crow and American robin. They are both, or the common robin, sorry. raven. Oh my gosh, words. So we can look at the American crow or the common raven, and they are both exhibit a very similar silhouette. This is because they are both in the same family, Corvidae. Jays also tend to exhibit this silhouette. And then we can go into exhibiting by or identifying by behavior. So different birds will exhibit different behaviors. This can be seen in the European starling, who tends to fly together in formations called murmurs. These murmurs typically occur near dusk or dawn. And if you see a murmur, it might be European starlings, as they're very common throughout the US. Here is a short video exhibiting the behavior which gives the American dipper its namesake, this dipping motion that it does. And it's also typically found near rushing water. We can also identify it through time and location. Many birds are migratory, leaving their breeding locations for areas which will be more abundant in food throughout the winter. We can use migration, or Nevada falls right in the Pacific Flyway, a massive corridor for birds migrating from overwintering sites to their breeding sites, which means that we see many birds pass through Nevada, even if they aren't residents. We can use migration as a tool for when we should expect to see certain birds. Here is the native rufous hummingbird and a map of its migration trip. In southern Nevada, we can expect to see them around mid to late March, while up in northern Nevada, we should expect them to show up around early to mid-April, so right about right now. Birds will also occupy different habitats where their adaptations help them survive best. In the photo on the right, we have a great blue heron, a night-crowned heron, and a great egret. And as they are all fish-eating birds, they can commonly be found near the edges of water. On the left, we have a northern harrier who is known to fly really low over fields, just like in this photo. We can also identify through sounds and songs. So if a bird is calling, with experience, you might be able to identify it without ever having to see it. Sound can also lead you to find where the bird is located, which is really helpful for elusive birds. For birds with similar appearances, like sparrows, song can help species identification. So if you hear the song of a sparrow, you can probably figure out what it is just by song. So here are two birds. This one is a red-winged blackbird call, which is very common to those who live near streams or rivers, and they love to live in wetlands. They tend to make nests in cattails. They make kind of that trilling noise. And for those of you who might be in southern Nevada, one very common bird is the great-tailed grackle. So maybe next time you are walking near a stream or a wetland, you might be able to identify that red-winged blackbird just by its call, or maybe when you're walking along the strip, you might hear the songs of the grackle. So now that we've kind of evaluated our different methods of how to identify birds, we can look at how we would describe a bald eagle. How could we identify a bald eagle? We will start out with field marks. So for our field marks, I want you to think about, how would you describe a bald eagle to someone? For me, the first thing that comes to the mind is that white head. Why they get their namesake bald eagle, it's because they have that really white head. I would also think about the brown body, the yellow hooked beak, and those golden eyes. Now we think about size and shape. I would be thinking of a rather large bird, as they have a 6-foot wingspan. They would have broad shoulders and a hooked beak. This photo on the right is of Emma, who is a resident at Lake Tahoe Wildlife Care. She lost a wing, so she is a permanent resident there. And then we can look into behavior. Where would we expect them to, or what would we expect to see them doing? These guys tend to soar really high into sky. They like to ride the thermals. They also tend to build huge nests in trees near water. So that brings us into time and location. These guys tend to hang out near water. This is typically because their primary diet is fish, fairly small fish. They can get some pretty large fish, and they can swim. So their diet is typically fish and small birds or mammals. They'll also scavenge though. So this is what I would use to help describe where I would expect to find a bald eagle. And then we can get into vocalization. So in your mind, you might imagine that they have a strong and powerful screech. However, it's more like a series of short, high-pitched shrieks. Not really as majestic as you might have thought. So here are some resources to help further your bird identification skills. The Audubon Bird Guide app is a free field guide which has over 800 species of North American birds. If you enter a description, you can get a list of possible matches. The Merlin Bird ID app is another great identification app. It asks you 5 questions and then narrows down from 400 bird species to only a handful of species that might have been the bird that you saw. The eBird app is a wonderful citizen science app that allows you to submit observations from all over the world. It also allows you to look at other people's observations to try to find or to see if there's any local birds that maybe you've been wanting to see that have appeared lately. They also work to do the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is an annual bird count done just by everyday people who go outside into their backyards or on a trail and observe and count how many and what species that they see. Hummingbirds at Home is another great citizen science app which allows you to submit the observations of hummingbirds and the plants or feeders that they are feeding on. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation today. It will be posted soon to our YouTube page under the webinars playlist. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me at my email and I will try to respond in a timely manner. I will now unmute Scout Kirby, who will let me know if there are any additional questions left to be answered. Hello, Scout.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so it seems like at this point in time, we don't have any more questions submitted, but if you have time, I'm more than comfortable sitting a few minutes and waiting to see if we have any last-minute questions come in.
Sounds good to me. So if you have any last-minute questions, feel free to submit them and we will start going over. Otherwise, if you are going to be leaving us now, thank you so much for joining us, and please remember to stay at home for Nevada. It's really important that we're all staying at home, even though I know many of us love to be outdoors and going on hikes right now. But set up a bird feeder in your backyard and you can go birding right in your own backyard.
All right, you ready for some questions, Amanda?
Sure.
Perfect. All right, so first question, are you going to be having any more birding classes on Zoom in the future?
Yes, so we have another one planned. I think it's next week, also on Tuesday at 2 p.m., which will be going over birds specifically around Reno and the Western region. And then we plan on also having another presentation on Las Vegas, like birds found more towards the southern region in Las Vegas, and maybe another one also for Elko in the eastern region.
Awesome. All right. We have another question. How can you tell the difference between a northern harrier and a rough-legged hawk?
So one of the main defining features of the northern harrier is going to be that they have a facial disc. So similar to an owl, how they have kind of that circular, those angled feathers that are around their face that kind of like look like a circle. They've made a circle angling towards their face. The northern harrier also exhibits that. Another great defining feature of the northern harrier is that it has kind of this white rump patch. This is what I personally use to identify it. So if you see a bird flying around that has a giant white rump on it, or patch on its rump, right above its tail feathers, that is a northern harrier.
Perfect. All right, so another question, not necessarily sure which location in Nevada, but where are you more likely to see warblers? Maybe what type of habitats?
Warblers, I know that I see a ton around like wetland areas. I've seen a few, I've seen some, so down in Las Vegas, I've seen some at the Bird Refuge Center. I can't remember exactly what the name of it is, but there's a little bird refuge in the middle of Henderson that I've seen a few warblers at. Up in Reno, I know I've seen them at Oxbow and at San Rafael. I don't have much experience with the eastern region, so I wouldn't be able to tell. And then some of these species also will occupy different habitats just by preferring more wetland or preferring more pastures and habitat.
Awesome. All right, so here is a really good question. Are there any tips in regards to maybe clothing and other things? Any colors or patterns you should avoid when you're birding, anything like that?
I typically try to go out in more muted colors like tans. I would try to avoid maybe wearing something very bright as you kind of want to be a little more camouflaged. Don't know too much on patterns, but I know that I typically try to go with a more neutral color to help myself blend in with the landscape and maybe not stand out as much to birds who might fly away if they notice me.
All right, so how about someone has a question about some of their feeders that they have up. They're trying to attract finches, but it's also attracting other species like our pigeons. They would want to know if there's any things they can do to maybe scare away some of the birds they don't want to attract, or anything they can use that will keep those birds from coming and taking all the food from the finches.
So that is a problem I also battle. Sometimes getting like a suet feeder, so ones where birds can't just perch on them, but they need to kind of like hang off the side, like those caged suet feeders. The pigeons I notice tend to not go towards mine because they can't get a good, they don't like to sit sideways, they prefer to sit upright. So if it has a little perch on it, they might take advantage of that. They also make certain bird feeders that are weighted. So if a bird that's too heavy goes on it, it'll start to spin around. That's what I got, and I noticed that it helps deter the pigeons from sitting on it.
Awesome. All right, so we have another question. Why do larger fish-eating birds hang out at golf courses a lot of the time?
So a lot of times golf courses will have ponds. Sometimes these ponds are stocked, sometimes they're not. So living in a very dry state that is Nevada, these birds will be flocking towards any source of water that they can find, hoping that there might be fish in there.
Let's see. How about, so once again, not sure what location this person is at in the state, but maybe for the Reno area, are there any parks that you like to go birding? And if so, what parks would those be?
I personally love to go birding at Oxbow Nature Study Area. I also work out of there, so whenever I'm there, I'm pretty much bird watching. I love going to the wildlife refuges. Those are pretty cool. But as for parks, Rancho Rafael is a really good place. Down in Las Vegas, I know Sunset Park has some pretty good trails that go through it. I've also seen a lot of really good a lot of birds at Red Rock. Red Rock.
Awesome. So then I think this one you had pictures of both. Someone would like to know if you could go over some of the differences between the brewer's blackbird and a European starling.
Okay, so the brewer's blackbird, I can go back. So the brewer's blackbird is going to be all black and have this really bright white eye. So the brewer's blackbird is going to have this really bright, here it is, this really bright like white eye, and it's going to be all black and kind of iridescent. And then we can compare this to our European starling, who tends to have white tips on their feathers. So they tend to have the white tips on their feathers. These white tips tend to go away during breeding season, and but during breeding season they'll be really iridescent. The white tips will kind of start to go away. They'll also have a really bright yellow beak, whereas the brewer's blackbirds have the black beak, are all black. They don't have.
Right.
We'll take a couple more questions and then we will probably close it down to just text responses.
All right, so real quick, let me get through the rest of these questions, and then if I have any for Amanda to answer, I'll ask her to do that.
Sounds good. So I see someone commenting that they have a mystery bird. Feel free to email me the video and I'll see if I can identify it. If I can't, I will contact one of my friends who are also birders and see if maybe they have some input, and I will get back to you.
Mm-hmm. And then, so there's one question.
Oh, someone wants the app pages. Here's the app pages.
Perfect. So one of the comments or questions is about someone who in Washoe found 2 cranes which looked grayish on the sides and their backs were reddish brown. My first thought would be that they're sandhill cranes. Would you think the same, Amanda?
Yeah, probably sandhill cranes. There are only 2 crane species, I think, in northern Nevada, and I'm pretty sure we only get the sandhill crane here in Nevada.
Perfect. So yeah, any of these questions, if you have a picture of a mystery bird or a description, I'd recommend sending that to Amanda's email. That way she can get back to you.
I see someone, Rhonda has a question about a towhee that has been on the outside ledge of her garage window and has been attacking the window. This is definitely due to mating behavior. It thinks that that reflection is another male or a challenger who is hoping to take his mate. So sometimes just covering up those windows or putting some of those decals on the windows can help prevent birds from doing this.
Oh, and then Amanda, would you, if we are not going to be on this app screen anymore, would you mind putting it on a screen that has your email address?
Yes, here is my email. Someone asking if birds are just if like birds on migration are just passing through, then would it be worth it to put up a hummingbird feeder? I personally think so. I think it is a great aid for them on their journey. And some birds don't make the full migration. They might just choose to hang around. If they do find a suitable habitat, sometimes birds don't complete their migration and they will hang around throughout breeding season in the areas where they're not typically known to breed.
All right. I have someone that wants to know about our American robins. Are they going to be, I believe it was in Las Vegas all year round?
I don't know about Las Vegas. I do know that they are around in northern Nevada year round. They tend to, their population tends to really spike in the spring. But I do not know about Las Vegas, how long they tend to hang around there for. I think they might just be passing through.
Perfect. And then for our backyard birders that want to be attracting hummingbirds, what would you recommend they do to attract them?
So planting those native plants, that's really is what's going to attract a lot of birds. If you have a lot of flowers for them to pollinate and get nectar from, that'll bring them. They really like the color red. That's why a lot of the bird feeders are the color red. So trying to get native plants that have red flowers, also providing water sources will bring more birds. And if you have a lot of cover in your yard, that's going to help birds feel really protected and safe when they go to when they go to feed.
So then also in regards to hummingbirds, I don't know if this will be in one of your later ID webinars, but do you have any recommendations for IDing female hummingbirds?
That's a really tough one that I still really struggle with. It's just going to take experience and really just looking and comparing photos. I go to a Facebook group, Birding Nevada. That's what I go to whenever I need to identify a female hummingbird. A lot of the people on there are way more experienced than I am and have helped me out many times. You see someone saying, what are the birds that stay up all night long singing in the springtime? If you live in Nevada, if you live in Las Vegas, those are the mockingbirds. Mockingbirds love to sing all night long. I see someone asking about discussing Clark's Nutcracker, call-in habits. If you email me, I can go more into detail about that. I would have to look back at my field notes to make sure that I'm not confusing it with another bird.
And then if we are not getting to anyone's questions or if they are getting skipped around, we are getting a huge influx of questions right now. And so that is the reason why we are having a little bit of trouble getting to all of them quickly. So if everyone can just be as patient as possible, we promise we will answer your questions. We apologize for any inconveniences.
So someone is asking about the increase in geese at the Henderson Bird Preserve, and that there's a lot more than last year. It's not that the migration paths are shifting, it's that we are creating more suitable habitat for them to hang around year round. These birds love to hang out on golf courses and large grass patches. And as Las Vegas gets further and further developed, we are putting in more parks and more open grassy spaces for these geese to be able to live year round at, which will ultimately increase their population. So yeah, not that the migration paths are shifting, it's just that the habitat is getting better for them. So someone asked, where do they sign up for next week's Zoom lecture? It is, I think, posted on the Facebook page. There should be, under events, a link to where you can sign up and register for the next Zoom lecture. Someone's asking what's the best way to attract mockingbirds. Again, planting native plants, putting out fresh water sources, adding bird feeders are all great ways to attract mockingbirds, which are very common all throughout Las Vegas.
I have another question. So someone says they've been seeing a nesting owl at Carson River Park, but now they are unsure whether it's an owl or a northern harrier. So do you have any ID tips for them?
So owls will tend to be like really stocky. Their necks kind of just blend into their body. Like there's not really any kind of definition. Whereas the northern harrier is a little more hawk-like, so there is more definition between the head and the body. So that's one thing that you can go to look at. Also, if you do have a chance to see it maybe flying, look for that white patch on its rump.
So someone else had a question. Someone who lives near Vegas, they wanted to know, is it just a Hollywood myth that there are all these birds flying and soaring in the sky, because they do not see them all that often?
Yeah, coming from Las Vegas up to Reno, I definitely noticed the increase in just birds of prey overall, and their prevalence, like how often I see them. Down in Las Vegas, they are going to be more scattered, more far and few in between. They're mostly going to appear where their food sources are going to be. So they're not really going to be hanging out in open areas if there is no food around. So around in the suburbs, they're probably not going to be that high and around, but typically places like the Henderson Birding Preserve, where there are large congregations of bird that they can hunt. That's where you'll probably find them. There are still birds and hawks soaring out. They just don't typically hang out near roads, is what I've personally come to notice. Down in southern Nevada, they tend to hang out near where habitat is going to be better for them to hunt smaller birds. So near like foothills and such.
So I had a question earlier asking about whether it is allowed to use, whether people can fly their drones in wildlife refuges. And actually, I believe that is considered illegal. It's illegal to operate unmanned aircraft on refuge property without special permits. So you will have to get a special permit if you would like to do that.
I see someone asking if I have a document with the most common bird species in Nevada. So I personally do not have one, but I know that the Great Basin Bird Observatory has a whole bunch of birds listed on their website of birds which tend to be seen in Nevada. So if you go to their website, they have a great list there. So someone said they see a medium-sized bird with a long black tail and a white and black striped neck, like a necklace. Do you have an idea of what that could be, Scout?
What did you say was the description again?
Black bird with a white necklace.
Black bird with a white necklace.
Oh, I think it's a magpie. I think what you're saying is a magpie.
Especially if it's got a long tail.
Yeah, with that long tail, it's probably a magpie. Probably a black-billed magpie.
So let's see. Someone else had a question. Have there been vultures in Nevada all along? They have never seen them before, only in California, and they've been here the past 30 years.
Yes, so vultures are native to Nevada. I also have been noticing kind of an increase in their presence. I'm not really sure what that indicates, but they are native. So it might just be that they're the habitat, or not the habitat. Well, yeah, pretty much everything about the habitat and the resources are just favoring a boom in vulture reproduction. Someone asked, how do you tell the difference between a hawk and a falcon? So hawks tend to be more broad. They tend to have like very broad wings also. Falcons tend to have wings that kind of come to an angled tip at the ends. And falcons also have on their beak, they have what I think we call it a tooth. And it's just a little, it kind of just looks like a little triangular jutting piece of their beak that kind of pops out. That helps them be able to eat their food. So it's just like a little tooth on the side of their beak. So that's the main identifiers, that the hawk is going to be more broad, while the falcon's going to be more like angled and tend to be smaller too.
And then These are not related to our birds, but I've seen quite a few questions about jackrabbits and where people can see them. So just real quick, jackrabbits are usually going to be in areas that are more scrubby, so where there's a lot of sagebrush especially. That's where you're going to be seeing more of the jackrabbits.
So someone says, are bird feeders a good or a bad thing? So this could be very controversial depending on who you ask and where you are. Personally, I like having bird feeders in my backyard. I keep a very close eye on them though. Bird feeders can be good if you tend to take them down as, so if you notice that other animals are coming along and feeding your bird feeder, it's probably a good idea to remove it for a couple weeks or a couple months until those animals know that that bird feeder is not around anymore. A lot of times bird feeders can be attractants for bears. So if you live in an area with a high population of bears, you might want to steer away from using bird feeders and look more into native plant landscaping to try to make it more natural rather than favorable to like bears and such. Also, it's good to clean out your bird feeders regularly. Things like conjunctivitis tend to spread throughout our bird populations. If you leave a hummingbird feeder out in very hot weather, it can go foul very fast. So hummingbird feeders in like Las Vegas during the peak of summer, I would recommend changing out once a day just to ensure your hummingbirds stay nice and healthy. Someone says that they have a folding pocket guide, Nevada Birds from Waterford Press, and they recommend it. Maybe look into that. Someone says that they have a hummingbird feeder close to a finch feeder and that the hummingbirds don't appear to be visiting. It could be that there is just so much activity from those finches that it is deterring the hummingbirds from coming in, as they are easily spooked little birds. So maybe I'll place them on opposite sides of the backyard and see if that has some kind of improvement, or maybe place the hummingbird feeder near somewhere that has more shelter to help the bird feel more protected. Unfortunately, I don't have any other tricks other than filling the water reservoir to keep ants out of hummingbird feeders. Other than that, that's the trick that I use. I would maybe look to Google and see if anyone else has any other recommendations. Someone says that there is a bird that looks like the common grackle, but it is a light brown. I'm gonna say that's the female not common grackle, but great-tailed grackle. They look very similar to the great-tailed grackle because they are the same species. They're just female, so they're not gonna be as pretty as female birds tend to kind of be.
Right, and then it looks like you've answered all of the questions that are in the Q&A at this point, Amanda.
Great. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this presentation. If you have any further questions, feel free to shoot me an email, or if you have any other things you wish to inform me about, you can also shoot me an email. Someone asked for the Facebook address. So if you go to Facebook and you just type in Nevada Department of Wildlife or NDOW in the search bar, it will bring you to our Facebook page. Under our Facebook page, you will see a bar that says events. And if you click on that, it will bring you to our events page, which lists all of our webinars, which we will have over the next couple of weeks. So again, I hope you guys had a good time and enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for attending. I know that you're a supporter of wildlife. And again, I just have to advise that we all stay home until the end of this COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you guys for attending and have a nice day.